DreAllDay.com. Tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That's the go-getter energy that moves anyone out there, including yourself, especially yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And we put all this together in one bundle, one package, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, one book, one masterclass. This daily show, if you didn't know, the show came out every day. Yes, every day. That is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. Today's topic is how business is just like sports. We're going to talk about the parallels between the business world and the sports world. Now, just yesterday, I told you why I look to entrepreneurs in the business world over players in the sports world, even though, of course, I'm an athlete, as far as when it comes to virtual mentorship and some of the pros and cons of being an athlete versus being a full-fledged entrepreneur. Whereas an athlete, you can't be a full-fledged entrepreneur, at least not as the athlete part. You could be one on the side, but as the athlete part, it doesn't really work that way, as I explained in yesterday's masterclass. But I was asked this question recently when I was on someone else's show. I was actually on Alex Sharpton's podcast, which is about business. And he asked me, what are some of the parallels between the business world and the sports world? And I answered his question, and then I realized when I was done recording his show, I realized, you know what? I had never actually made a direct masterclass talking about this, how the business world and the sports world are parallel. So now that I realized I didn't do that, and I went and thought about it, and now today we're going to talk about it, so you can consider, as of this episode, that problem to be solved. How business is just like sports. Now, if you didn't know, I wrote a book called Work on Your Game, and the subtitle is Using the Pro Athlete Mindset to Dominate Your Game in Business, Sports, and Life. So in that book, I draw a ton of parallels between the professional athlete, world and the business world. And on this show, every single day, I'm giving you analogies and stories and anecdotes and frameworks that work not only in the business world, but also work in the sports world. Some of them I learned in the business world as an entrepreneur, which I've been for over 10 years. And some of them I learned in the sports world, as I was an athlete from, I guess if you count back to when I first started playing, all the way up till I stopped for about 20 years. So some things come from the sports world and I tell you how they apply to business. Some things come from the business world, I tell you how they apply to sports. Some things come from the life world and I tell you how they apply to both business and sports. And sometimes I talk about a topic that's really specifically about sports or specifically about business, but I tell the athletes and the business people listening respectively, hey, even though this specific topic is not directed towards you, you should still listen, because you, being an intelligent individual, you will be able to glean some things that you could take from this that you can still apply to your sport or business, even though the topic is business or sports, if you understand what I'm saying. So now with this problem being solved, of talking about how business and sports are related, well, it's not solved until we finish this. So let's get started so we can get done. Point number one, today's topic once again, is how the business world and the sports world are parallel. Point number one, performance culture. This one is especially leaning towards the sports world. In professional sports, you must perform every single day. You have to deliver to either stay in the game or even to get in the game. And in the business world, this is true as well. The difference in the sports world is that in sports, everybody's watching everything that you do. You're being watched every single day that you're at work. Depending on what sport you play and how big of an audience that sport has, everything you do at work is being seen. Now, of course, people don't see the practices and the off-season training, but the games, people see that. In the business world, there's usually not an audience of people who come to watch you make phone calls or close a sales deal. So you could maybe for some time or maybe for a long time get away with not really doing that much performing, not that much delivering, and kind of get away with it because nobody's really watching over you. But in the sports world, everybody's watching over you. You can't hide if you're not performing. But in both, you have to deliver to either stay in the game or get in the game. And this is why the business world likes hearing from people like Dre Baldwin. Why? Because I've been in the sports world and I can articulate the sports experience and the similarities and applications to the business world. And one of them is, again, you got to come out there and do your job. And the thing is, since the athlete knows they're being watched and knows that their career could hang in the balance and how they perform every single day, there's that urgency to perform at your best, starting with the way that you think, then translating to the way that you actually physically do things. And business audiences want to learn about that mentality. They want to learn what's the mindset that goes behind that, because every company, if they have people working at that company, would love for all of their staff to start adopting that mindset. They would love for people on their staff who aren't being watched. There isn't anybody who's going to write an article about you. Nobody's going to post it on Instagram if you messed up at work yesterday, but it will happen in the sports world. They want to hear from people who know what that feels like to have that, if you want to call that pressure, or just have that urgency about your performance to make sure you're delivering, because you know you're being watched and you know your job or career could hang in a balance. If you could get a business person who does not have the same environment to have that same energy, they can get a whole lot more done. Now imagine if you had 20 people working for you and they all stepped up their energy in that way, stepped up their focus in that way. Imagine if you had 1,000 people working for you and they all stepped up their discipline and their mental toughness and believed in themselves more and performed as if they were being watched, even if they weren't being watched. Wouldn't that company do a whole lot better? So what I do as a former athlete, now in the business world, whenever I'm talking to business audiences, I like to relate. I start with the mental game tools: discipline, confidence, mental toughness, personal initiative. I'm gonna do a whole masterclass just on those and how they relate to both business and sports in the future. That's coming very soon. But I talk about how those mental game tools, first of all, what they are, how they work, and how they translate into performance, because just having mental game tools alone doesn't really do anything. All right, being disciplined is cool, but how does that actually produce a result? Being confident, being mentally tough, taking personal initiative, all those things are great, but how do they actually produce results? Remember that nobody signs up for hard work, ladies and gentlemen. The hard work that it takes to be disciplined or to have mental toughness or even to build confidence, nobody signs up for that. People sign up for the results of those things. So that's what I communicate to business audiences, what I communicate to you all every single day. I mean, how many times have you heard me say that you are in a performance and a results-based business? So in the sports and business world, there is a performance culture where the best performers ostensibly are the ones who should be getting promoted. And the sports world is set up like that, it's structured that way. The best performers always get promoted. And the business world is not always set up like that, so you're gonna need some extra steps. Like you're gonna need some political skills. You're gonna need to deal in politics. You're gonna need some people skills. You're gonna need some communication skills. You're gonna need some sales and marketing skills. Luckily enough for you, if you go at workonyourgameu.com and log into your game group membership, I have several masterclasses on all of those topics that I just said, so you don't have to worry about figuring it out on your own. I show you exactly how to do it inside a game group membership. If you're not a game group member, go to workonyourgameu.com. Starts a free 2-week trial ASAP. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is how business and sports are related. How they are similar. Point number 2, you may have competitors, but you are mainly competing against your personal best. Number 2, while you may have competitors, your biggest competition is whatever your personal best is. Now, while all of us, all being human, we will use other people as measuring sticks from time to time. We all do this. We look and see what the person to the left of us, to the right of us is doing, the person that's trying to catch up to us, the person that's a little bit ahead of us. We all look and see what they're doing. We know we do. Our real potential, though, in life is always going to be in exceeding what we have possibly done ourselves and seeing how far we can take ourselves. That's where our real potential is at, because we don't know what somebody else's potential is. So even if you look to the person to your left and to your right and you said, all right, I'm gonna beat them. Maybe they're a little bit ahead of you right now, and then you beat them and you're beating them. So you're number 1, right? That may not necessarily mean that you've reached your potential. Your potential could be 10 times higher than that. But if you're only measuring yourself by, I'm just gonna beat the people who I can see, you may still leave yourself at only 15% of your own personal capacity. Your potential could be way higher than everybody else's. So your real competition is not what everybody else is doing. Even if everybody else is ahead of you right now, once you get ahead of them, you may still have more to go. And if you really have that ambition to maximize your talent, you can go way further than everyone else out there. So you wanna make sure you're careful to not fall in that trap of just measuring yourself by other people, which is human nature, but not looking at saying, no, what is my actual potential? Forgetting what these guys are doing or these girls are doing. Where's my personal potential? So we use other people as measuring sticks, but we know our best is really our best. And that requires a high level of mental toughness, because maybe, just maybe, you may get to the point that you have passed everybody around you, but there's a lot more that you can do. So now your competition really is just yourself. It's not anybody else around you. And that takes a high level of mental toughness to keep pushing yourself when there's no actual people in front of you for you to defeat. We don't know other people's situations and what they've been through in order to get to where they are, whether that's right next to you or a little bit above or below you. But all we can really do, as I said, is best our own best. Maybe that'll be enough when you give your best. Maybe that'll be enough to get you to the number one spot. Maybe it won't be. But most of us never find out because we spend so much of our time looking at what everybody else is doing rather than looking at what we could be doing. We're paying attention to, all right, how can I beat this person? How can I get ahead of them? This person looks like they may be surging ahead of me. This person's trying to catch me from behind. We spend so much time looking at what everybody else has going on that we never actually consider, hey, what if I just focused on reaching my full potential and let's just see where I end up? Put my blinders on so I don't see what everybody else is doing. Not just focus on reaching my full potential. Let's see where I end up after I do all of that. And I'm pausing there just to let that sink in with you. If you really stop competing against everybody else and measuring yourself by what everybody else did compared to what you did, and instead said, let me do what I do compared to what I've done, and let's just see how far I can take it from there, where would you get to? How far could you go? Well, I don't want you to answer that question. You can't answer it until you actually do it. And you can't do it until you stop focusing on what everybody else is doing. The challenge in the world that we live in today is that what everybody else is doing is always available for you to be looking at. All right, how many apps do you have on your phone right now that give you constant updates on what everybody else is doing? All right, probably the last 5 apps that you open, right? And this happens in business as well as sports. This applies to both. In the sports world, it's more obvious to see simply because we have a scoreboard in sports and everybody knows the scoreboard. Everybody's beholden to the scoreboard. We have won-loss records, we have rankings, and everybody looks at these things. We have these leaderboards that tell us who's number 1, who's number 2, who's ahead of us, who's behind us, who's equal to us. And we can always look at what everybody else is doing to see what we would need to do just to get to the number 1 spot. But again, remember, getting to the number 1 spot may not be the full extent of your potential. You could get to the number 1 spot, maybe only using 50% of your potential, but that other 50%, are you driven to get to that? That's where the work on your game mentality really starts to kick in, is pushing yourself past and pushing yourself beyond what everybody else is doing or being better than everybody else and being the best version of yourself, being better than you. All right, point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is how business and sports are parallels. Number 3, teamwork is essential. Even in a solo sport, track and field, golf, boxing, there are trainers, there are other solo athletes that you train with, and there are many other people involved in the preparation and performance that goes into your delivery. Can we all agree? Do we have anyone here who plays a solo sport? I know that listen to this show, I have some boxers, there are some MMA fighters, there are some golfers, there are some horseback riders, believe it or not. I'm not sure we have many track and field, but I'm sure we got a few. And I think those are the only solo sports that I can think of. But so in those sports, those athletes who are listening to this right now, can we agree? There's a team around you, even though you don't play a team sport. You got a trainer, you might have a physical therapist, you might have, depending on what sports you play, tennis is another sport I didn't name. In tennis, you got a person who might help you with your swing. You might have a person who helps you with your conditioning. You might have a person who helps you with what you eat, the nutritionist. You might have a trainer who just helps you with your overall body. And those could all be separate people, right? So there's a team in place, even when you're playing a solo sport. And if you're playing a team sport like football or basketball, of course you got a team. You got teammates that you got to perform with on the court or on the field to even win the game in the first place, or all y'all gonna be out of a job, right? Everybody will be unemployed if that team doesn't work together. So there are many other people involved in the preparation and performance of what you do. And in the business world, of course, no individual person is talented enough or resourced enough to do everything solo. Nobody. As good as I think I am, I can't do everything by myself. Actually, let me check that. I could do everything by myself. The problem is it would be like running on a treadmill. I'd be running really hard, but I'm not actually moving forward because the amount of resources and energy and time and attention it would take for me to do everything that happens in my business by myself, I would never have time to do anything strategic, any big picture things, any 30,000 foot view things. I'd be down in the woods, chopping down each individual tree and cutting the grass and doing all that stuff, because there'd be too many things that I would have to do just to keep everything running as is, just to keep everything keep everything neutral, I would have to do too much work. I would never have time or the mental capacity to really look at making things do better. So in the business world, no matter how talented you are, no matter how much of a hustler, no matter how hard of a worker you are, you will always and can always go further if you build a strong team with the right people around you who are doing the right jobs strategically. So even if in business you're a one-man show or one-woman show right now, or at least you think you're a one-man or one-woman show, without a team, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you will not approach even 50% of your full potential in business. Pausing for emphasis there. Without a team in place, you will not approach even 50% of your full potential in business. You must learn to work with others, to get along with other people, to play with other people, to assign roles to others, to accept your role. Even when you're in charge, you got to give yourself a role, okay? And you got to learn when to give up control at certain points. And again, I'm talking about business and sports here when I say this. So let me get that list again, just in case you athletes thought I wasn't talking to you. And I'm talking to athletes and business people right now when I say, even if you think you are the man or the woman on your team or in your organization, or you are the only man and woman in your organization, without a team, you are not at even 50% of your potential right now if it's just you by yourself. There's no way. If you're a tennis player without a coach, you have not touched even 50% of your potential. You're a boxer without a trainer. All right, you haven't reached even half of your potential in that sport. If you're an entrepreneur and it's just you, I heard a business coach say this. I heard Alex Sharfin, business coach, say, if you don't have an assistant, you are an assistant. That's the best way of looking at it. When I heard him say that, I said, all right, I got to make sure I got an assistant. I got to make sure I got an assistant doing stuff, because I don't want to be an assistant. I need to be the CEO, charting the direction and the course of what I got going on in my business. As an athlete, if you think you're a one-man show, all right, your team is not doing as good as it could be doing. If you're a basketball player and you're scoring all the points on your team and nobody else on your team is really picking up any of the slack, all right, you need to do something about that. And it doesn't mean browbeat your teammates into doing what you want them to do. That ain't gonna work either. But you need to do something and get some people on your team who can actually pick up some slack, or help the people who are already on your team so they can help you pick up some of the slack. Because you will not win a championship with you doing everything by yourself and thinking that you have no help. Look at Michael Jordan. Perfect example. Michael Jordan was the best player. He was the best player on his team. He was the best player in the league. He was the best player in the world. But until he got his teammates to pick up some of the slack and help him, no matter what he did individually was ever going to be enough for him to win a championship. And that was his ultimate goal, was to win a championship. Once he finally got his teammates up to speed the way he needed them to be, he started winning championships. Even though Michael Jordan was great, he could not do it by himself. Even though he damn sure tried, he was unable to do it by himself. He had to have people around him. And if you read any things about Michael Jordan, I've read every book about Michael Jordan that has existed. I've read it probably every one of them at least 2 times. He had trainers around him. He had his personal people around him. He had his people from back home. He had his business people. He had his lawyers. He has a whole team of people around him helping him do his thing. As a basketball player, of course, it was him. Then he had his teammates. He had his big guys. He had his guards. He had his Scottie Pippens. He had his Dennis Rodmans. He had his coaches. He had all these people around him who helped him do his thing. Now, was he the best player? Was he the most important player? Was he the most valuable player? Yes, yes, and yes. But without those teammates, he wouldn't have reached the heights that he reached. Look at a guy like LeBron James. Any of you read or hear anything about LeBron, you often hear about his team, right? And I'm not talking about his basketball team. Look at LeBron James off the court. He has a business partner who helps him do a lot of his front-facing stuff, a lot of the things that he does with the schools and the TV shows and the media things that he does and the businesses that he invests in and I hear about every now and then. He has a business partner who helps him do those things. Then he got a friend who works as his agent. Then he has another guy who's like his personal assistant, does things for him just to keep his life running. All of these things. He has a wife who helps him raise his family and kids when he's around doing his basketball thing. I'm sure she takes up a lot of the slack at home so he can focus on doing what he does in basketball. All of these things are part of the team. And these are all different teams that he may have. He got a basketball team. He may have a business team. He got a friendship team. There's a family team. And then all of those teams allow him to focus on what he does best, which is being LeBron James on that court. Because being LeBron James on that court allows him to do all those other things and allows all those teammates to be able to do their job comfortably, because he's handled his business as being that guy, as being the king, as he nicknamed himself. So look at all the people around him and you see That's what it does. Look at anyone who seems to be performing at their best. They seem to be in their zone as far as how they can perform and how they produce results. I guarantee you there is a strong team around, behind, next to, in front of that individual. You may not know about it, but there is a strong team around them. There's a strong team around Bill Gates. You might not know about Bill Gates' team, but I guarantee you there's a strong team there. Name anyone who seems to be doing really well with their business and their sport and their whatever. I guarantee you there's a strong team. Look at somebody like Floyd Mayweather, the boxer. Who knows if he's ever going to box again? I hope not. But he had a strong team around him. He talked about it all the time. He called it the money team. It was a whole team of people who kept him in, allowed him to do what he did best, which is train for boxing and win boxing matches, because winning boxing matches was the golden goose that gave him all the resources that allowed him to take care of everybody who was on the money team. Same thing with LeBron James, same thing with Michael Jordan, same thing with Bill Gates, same thing with Oprah, same thing with anyone who appears to be doing very well at what they're doing. They have a team around them that allows them to focus on the golden goose, laying those golden eggs, which allows everybody else to be taken care of. Your team needs to be the same way. If you don't have a team, then consider this your directive to start looking for one. And I will do a separate episode specifically, as I said already, on the framework of the entire Work on Your Game framework and how it applies to both business and sports. I'll do that in a separate episode. So let's recap today's topic, which is how business is just like sports. I was asked this recently on Alex Sharfman's show. I realized I hadn't made a masterclass about it. Now that problem is solved. Point number one, there's a performance culture. You got to deliver to get in the game. You got to deliver to stay in the game. In the sports world, everybody's watching you every time you perform. In the business world, it may not be like that, but that's why business people like hearing from people like me, because I can relate to them what it's like to have to perform every single day with your job and your career on the line. And they want their people in the business world who may not have the same real life pressures to have the urgency of actually having it, even if it's not tangibly what the situation is. Point number two, you may have competitors, but you are mainly competing against your personal best. That's the only way you will reach your full potential, is by competing against your best, not competing against your competitors, because beating your competitors may only leave you at 70% of your potential. What about that other 30%? Are you going to rest on your laurels because you beat everybody else? Or are you going to push yourself to get as good as you can be, which could be way above, 10 levels above everybody else that's out there? Which one matters more to you? That's a personal question that you have to answer. Point number three, teamwork is essential. Even in solo sports, solo athletes have teams. At least the good ones, they all have teams. Any of you as a solo athlete, do you have a team? Or you're nodding your head vigorously right now. Any of you who knows a solo athlete, ask them, do you have a team? They're probably going to say yes if they're good. And if they say no, I guarantee you, no matter how good or talented they appear to be, they are not at even half of their potential if they do not have a team around them, simply because nobody is good enough, nobody is talented enough, nobody has enough time on their hands, nobody has enough skills to do everything on their own. Michael Jordan tried it and it didn't work. When he got his team in place, he started winning. LeBron James has had a team in place the entire time that we've known about LeBron James. And LeBron James, I think we would have to agree, whether you love him or hate him, we have to agree the guy is goddamn successful at what he does. Oprah Winfrey, Bill Gates, you might not know who their teams are, but I guarantee you there's a team that exists. And I'm going to do a separate episode, as I told you, a separate masterclass on the entire Work on Your Game framework and how it applies to both business and sports in the future. But tomorrow, let me tell you what's coming tomorrow. I'm going to tell you why business is not like sports. This is my skill. I'm gonna give you both sides. And if you don't have a book, Work on Your Game, go to workonyourgamebook.com and rectify that problem right now before we run out of trees to print the paper on. Work on your game. Dre all day.